When I do I-cord, I do a provisional cast on. I'm going to make the cast on stitches on the tail. So when you make your loop, make sure that the loop, if you pull on the tail of the loop, it's going to cause the loop to come undone. Crochet hook, this is an eye. It doesn't really matter what you use because the needle you cast onto is the one that's going to determine the size of the stitches. I've used a much smaller needle than this, or a much smaller hook than this. So I have my tail, this is the end I'm going to create the stitches on. This is my stay out of the way, this is the one I'm going to knit with. So I put my DPN, I'm using little short DPNs, but you can use long ones. Putting my DPN next to my crochet hook with the hook up, I go I lay the tail over the top of the DPN. I go around, then I grab this live stitch here. You see how this is a live stitch? I grab this live stitch here. I don't grab the tail, I'm holding the tail here, and I make my first stitch. I'm going to repeat that for the number of times, or the number of stitches I want for my I-cord. So I'm going to do 4 stitches. Oops, drop that sucker. There's 2. There's 3. And there's 4. So there are my 4 I-cord stitches. I'm going to chain off the tail that controls the tension on the last stitch on the needle, and it gets rid of the tail so it doesn't get worn out and it doesn't get in the way. So that's the provisional cast on, and I will show you how we handle it from there. Transfer 2 of those stitches to another DPN, and you're going to fold it. You see how I have it folded? So that the tail, when you bring the tail up, it comes from the back side up through your needles. And you start knitting. And I just knit with, I don't try and break it into a whole bunch of little tiny DPNs. I mean, you could if you want, but for me this works just fine. So let me do a little bit of I-cord, and I will come back to you and show you how you do use it as a cast on. Before I show you the actual cast on, I want to show you what the end result looks like. This is 8 stitch I-cord. This is a provisional cast on. My provisional cast on is here somewhere. I've got short rows buried in there somewhere, but you can see in looking at it that it doesn't look sloppy. It doesn't look, inside or out, it looks really good. There's no sloppy stitches, there's no holes. It looks really good. So this is where we're headed. I'm not going to do a lot of picking up stitches. I want to talk about the anatomy of the I-cord for just a minute. When I pick up, I never pick up just one bar. For example, I would never just pick up this bar and put a stitch in it, because there's so much thread available to that one stitch that you'll end up with a big gape here, and you'll have holes between the stitches because there's just not enough real estate there to do it justice. If instead I take one bar of this stitch and then I go down one row and I take one bar of this stitch, or I take this stitch and this stitch together. Now here's what I do. Can you see, if I just spin this, I can slip underneath this stitch, and that gives me a very secure, with no hole. It's not going to stretch itself out. So let's say that's where I'm going to make my stitch. So I'm going to pick this stitch up, and I'm going to pick this is the same column here. We're only going to use this column, and I'm going to pick this one up, and that's the one I'm going to make my stitch in. I try and do this with a crochet hook because it's just really difficult to do with a needle, because you end up stretching it all out of shape. So I'm going to put that on my needle. There's that. Now here's the 411 on this. I have this is going to be hard to show you. I have picked up, let's start over. I have picked up this leg and this leg. So in the next stitch, when I create the next stitch, I'm going to pick up this leg and this leg. So I'm actually going to have two stitches through this. One that is paired with this and one that is paired with that. So let's do that, and I'll show you what it looks like. Pick that one up, set it on my needle. When you first start this, it's a little awkward, but the end result is really good. Now I have, can you see, this is the first stitch I picked up right here, and this is the second. So we're going to want to go in the second, and the next, we're going to go underneath the next stitch down, and that's the second stitch I'm going to pick up. I'm not paying any attention at all to stitch orientation. So here we go. This is the first stitch for this stitch. This is the first leg we picked up. This is the second. So we're going to want to go in the second and pick up the next leg. Here is the next one. You can see this is the first leg here. This is the second leg here. We're going to go in the second leg, and we will pick up the next leg, which is this one right here, and make our stitch. So you can see you're getting a nice, clean, no holes, really secure and tight. It's not going to stretch out. And that's the way you do it. You just keep picking up the second leg and a new leg, the second leg and a new leg, the second leg and a new leg. And it gives you a really nice, tight, looks good front and back. And it lets you use Icord as a cast on without the sloppiness. It works really well.